Episode 72, South Boston Stories. Dodging Southie Thugs. In 1961, I had a bad experience soon after I got out of the Army and went back to college. I had a summer job at Standard Thompson Company on Lansdowne Street, which was literally the back end of Fenway Park. Home runs over the green mosses still hit cars on Lansdowne Street. The plant made automobile thermostats. Some South Boston folks worked there also. I was in the quality control department and checked out the products against thermostat standards. I worked the second shift, 3 to 11 p.m. I got my cousin John, who was going to BU, a job there also. Lansdowne Street today is a very hip area with some of Boston's most popular nightclubs. But in my time, it was a commercial area with small factories, warehouses, repair shops, working stiff coffee shops, a working class bar called Kegs, and a popular bowling alley across the street from Standard Thompson. This was the summer of 1961. Boston had just begun its roiling maelstrom of anti-war, anti-busing, anti-capitalist, and feminist protests. Women were going braless, burning their bras, and trying out free love. I was living and hanging out on Beacon Hill and the Back Bay, which were heavily populated with young single women, most of them living high up in large multi-story brownstone apartment buildings. My father had an expression for those folks, cliff dwellers. Most of the women had roommates and often held impromptu parties. Drinking establishments on Charles Street, Cambridge Street, and Beacon Street were the nexus for my crowd to meet women. One summer weekend night, myself and friends mingled with a group of friendly women at Ferrara's in Scully Square. We got invited to an impromptu party at their apartment at Beacon Hill's Mount Vernon Street. We walked the girls to their third-floor apartments. The party with booze and music progressed to a very friendly welcome from our hostesses, such as close dancing, some grab ass, and some kissy face. Things were looking up. That's when a group of tough-looking guys knocked on the door. Unbeknownst to us, some Southie guys were at Ferrara's and overheard the invitation, the address, and the plans. They hoped to horn in on the party. The women shut the door on the unwelcome guests, but the intruders continued to bang loudly on the door and make a racket. With an alcohol-fuzzed brain, I volunteered to defend the door. Maybe I thought I might get brownie points. Again, fueled by booze, I thought I was pretty tough. So I confronted the goons. At the door, one guy tried to force his way in, and I knocked him down the stairs. I told the intruders I was calling the police, and they finally left, hollering lots of threats. The party went on until early the next morning. We were too busy to call the police. The following Monday, I went back to my job on Lansdowne Street. At the beginning of my shift, I noticed a guy leaving from the first shift. Worse yet, he noticed me. It was the guy I knocked down the stairs. He was a Mick from Southie. He threatened me, telling me he and his South Boston friends would be waiting for me at my shift's end. He threatened me with grave bodily harm using descriptive four-letter words. I was worried throughout my shift. I had no friends to help. I asked my cousin to stand with me when I finished the shift. He declined. So much for blood is thicker than water. When the shift change arrived, I peeked out, and the Southie thugs were there. I found a bathroom window, letting me escape the first night. The second and third nights, there were fewer of the waiting goons, but they were still there. Punch-out time began to have a double meaning for me. For the next few nights, I left by different exits or left earlier. Some nights they didn't show. I was able to duck them for another 2 weeks until school started again. I left the job and never saw any of them again. So I lucked out from another difficult situation once again. God looks after fools and babies. In my day, South Boston would come to mind for most folks when the subject of Boston's Irish population location comes up. There were many other sections of Boston and other towns too that were heavily Irish also. But Southie had a well-earned reputation for violent behavior by its mostly Irish-American men. It's a small enclave bordering downtown on one end and the Boston Harbor on the other. There are many Murphy connections to Southie, although we never lived there. Gary and I often fished at Southie's Castle Island Fish Pier. We had to trolley right through its main streets in order to get there. And my father worked at the MBTA South Boston Power Plant on A Street for many years. I used to visit him often to fish off the MBTA oil delivery trucks as a kid and as a young man also. Also later, he and I would have lunch together at the local South Boston taverns. Southie St. Patrick's Day Parade. Southie held the premier St. Patrick's Day Parade on March 17th every year. That day was an official holiday under the fiction of Evacuation Day, which supposedly celebrated a Revolutionary War victory. The Murphys went to that parade often. Just after Jean and I were married, we went to the parade with George and Bonnie Daniels, who were also newly married. After the parade, we were in a tavern on Southie's Broadway. The place was packed with singing, happy, and boisterous mix. We were on our first drink when a fight broke out at a table very near us. I warned everybody, and we grabbed our drinks and stood up as our table was knocked over, and until the participants calmed down. Such brawls reoccurred at least 3 times, and we finally left because we couldn't finish our drinks without the danger of getting slugged by mistake. From what I could make out, the fisticuffs were brawler competitions among the descendants of various Irish counties, or, in other words, up Cork and knock the Kerryman on his ass. Drunken fools. Although South Boston was rough and strictly shanty Irish, it suffered a terrible injustice by the Boston elites during the 1974 federal court-imposed forced school busing for racial integration. Visitors to Boston and either other Massachusetts residents misunderstood the obvious injustice of that fuzzy-headed idea. 3 Boston neighborhoods, South Boston, Charlestown, and Roxbury, unwillingly paid the price for the perceived or the real racism in the city. The all-white Brookline, Dover, and Wellesley-type towns, from where the critics and the judges sprung, were never affected. Note, some of my viewers and listeners have asked how they could comment on my episodes. There is a note at the top of each episode. Send us a text. Click that and you would be able to comment. Also, my podcast email is murphsluck@gmail.com if you like. This is Rod Murphy. Thank you for viewing or listening to my podcast episodes. I really appreciate it. If you liked it, and if you so choose, I ask you to send a good review and or refer a friend who might be interested in this Old Boston podcast series. Again, my thanks.